So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we are on the map Merlond? Or No, it's Merlond, isn't it? I think this map is called. And part of the reason why I did this one over some of the others I've been given, I've actually been given several on maps like the Cardland Outpost and such, but God, it's just an unholy mess of factions in those battles. I'm sure they're high quality because people were really eager for me to do them, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it today because part of what makes it easier for me to go through these battles is if there is some sort of, even if it's not necessarily good versus evil, some sort of narrative that I can craft as I go through the battle. With that mixture of factions, though, it was just completely impossible. It really is quite a vile mix of factions that they've decided to have go up against one another. There's really no story that I could make with that, so as high quality as they may be, they're going to be put on the back burner for the time being because I just can't bring myself to do a battle like that for the time being. But we do have a rather long and themed siege here because we have evil on the attack. We have got Kamul, Lord of the Easterlings, who rather ironically is actually playing as Umbar over here. He's going to be joined today by Rhun and the Misty Mountains, who have landed just on the beach near the settlement, and they're going to be facing off against two of the archer heavy factions for the Forces of Good, in very different ways though, Lothlorien and Dale. So we'll go through the attackers first and foremost, starting off with the Black Númenóreans and Corsairs from Umbar. Warlords of Umbar are here, so a unit of Lance Knights, which interestingly enough does not have the general in it, so they can be used a little bit more freely. I kind of doubt though, Lothlorien and Dale, if there's one weakness they both share, it's the fact they don't really have any really strong units of cavalry armed either with a lance or a sword. Lothlorien do have a very strong horse archer unit, but they don't really have anything on the level of the Warlords of Umbar at sort of taking control of an open field like this, so it would surprise me if Dale and Lothlorien decided to try and contest the outer areas against Umbar, to be honest, especially with the likelihood of crossbows as well. Alcarondas Legion backed up by Belagear pikemen as well as some Corsair blackguards. Obviously again, a good mix of high quality line infantry, some pikes to back them up, and obviously some pretty damaging javelins. We have more Alcarondas Legion, but we also have some extra AP in the shape of the Balakith Axe Guard, albeit this time without an armour upgrade. And against Lothlorien, the AP, because of the lower melee defense and sort of melee stats in general, might not be as useful. Against Dale, it certainly will. We've got some Naruna'aru Sentinels here, obviously a higher tier unit of pikes, some Corsair crossbows, Harbingers of Castamere, and then some archers as well, some crossbows, Naruna'aru Royal Guard, and also some Castamere's Rangers. So a lot of range punch, not necessarily a huge amount of skirmishing power though, just the one heavier unit of archers. So Umbar are probably going to have to be a little bit more front and centre than they normally are. Normally they can afford to take their time a little bit with things because of their heavy archers. But if you don't bring them, that is of course not the case. Then we have Bop Tanta, who's going to be playing as Rhun, so Kamul the Easterling will actually be on the field today, albeit not in the army named for such. Eastron crossbow, so again, more crossbowmen, albeit these ones cannot hide, even if they still have the same weakness at range as the Corsair crossbowmen. But still obviously in a situation like this, like you're never really going to beat Dale or Lothlorien for archer power, but crossbows of course offer something slightly different, and that is something that you can perhaps leverage against them. Baltroth Tribesmen, some Dragon's Wrath Crossmen, and some Carmels chosen. In behind we have a lot of Flag Rim, which should be useful against Dale, less so against Lothlorien again though, as of course is going to be the case for the Gamp Rim. There's a few units over on this side of the river who could find themselves actually getting overwhelmed if they're not too careful. Some Variag Mercenaries with some Easteron Clansmen with one level of armour upgrade. They can of course skirmish, there's two units of those Variags there, but of course with the high ground and with the superior quality I doubt that Lothlorien will be too concerned about that. And there's several units of upgraded Eastron Clansmen as well, so definitely a sort of token force over on this side of the river. They do need to be careful because if Lothlorien does decide to be aggressive, it could definitely work in their favour. And finally, the reinforcement column that has just arrived on the beach. We have Sumer, who's going to be playing as the Misty Mountains. Heavy Goblin Halberdiers, there's more of them, but of course they're of lower quality than the Gamp Rim they'll be fighting alongside. The only player to have really brought some of the heavier archers, but of course heavier is definitely in inverted commas when it comes to the Misty Mountains. Heavy Goblin Archers, even more crossbows though, so all three of the attacking factions today do have their crossbows, which is obviously something they could definitely use to their advantage. Heavy Goblin Spears with their armour piercing, Mountain Uruk Host who are going to be fighting on the front line, more Halberdiers, some Spears, more Mountain Uruk Host, Heavy Goblin Infantry who are now cheaper, so it's much more worthwhile to bring them, albeit they're still not going to be as strong as the Uruk Host, but mixing them together here. Cave Troll Drummers to keep all of this rabble pointing in the right direction, and then some Goblin King's Bodyguard and a Catapult back here, so some Siege, probably a couple of units of hidden units yet, some Snow Trolls which of course can hide. Now then, over here, starting off with what will be the pillar around which this defence is built up here on the higher ground. We have Lothlorien, played by Ellipses, and he has got some Lorenand spears, Lorenand archers who are already firing. We have some Lorenand spears over here, some Marchwards of the Wood who are already firing, so clearly he didn't take his units off fire at will. Probably going to be a few misplaced shots as a result. Watchers of the Goldenwood as well, you definitely don't want to be using high quality ammunition on the garbage which is just in front of them. Lorenand warriors, that AP will be useful against all of the factions really, to be honest. Maybe Rhun slightly less, but still all of them. Woodland protectors with their javelins, swordmasters as well, obviously really high base damage, which is going to be very, very useful here. And then also a line mixed up, well, I'd say actually this is just the entirety of Dale's force. We have Bacon Soup, who's got a catapult of his own, some Blackshot Dragon Slayers, some Athala Rangers, all of which are already firing as well, so no one on the defensive has taken their units off fire at will. But a huge amount of archers, including the Lake Town Infantry, which of course is very tempting to do as Dale. We will see if it works out for him. Lake Town Pikemen, some Barding Herd, obviously the heavier Halberdiers, some Dalian Spearmen, some Swordmasters of Esgaroth, and then there's another force just over here, made up of Lake Town Pikes, more Lake Town Infantry and more Dalian Bowmen. So yeah, a huge amount of archers, more Barding Herd over here. We'll see how well that actually works out for them, as without further ado, let's begin. And it's obvious here that Dale do actually intend to hold this area over here, which is quite a wide zone to try and hold on to. We'll see how well it goes. From multiple sources here, the Variag mercenaries taking hits, but a lot of these arrows are largely wasted. I mean, they're obviously going to take some losses here on both their mercenaries and their clansmen, but I mean, if the elves really want to be that wasteful with their ammunition, which does look as though Ellipses does not want to be that wasteful, he is going to instead move his troops into a different position, but he does actually need to hurry because Rhun deploying this far forwards means they can actually establish a bit of a beachhead up here. Now they will need reinforcements pretty quickly from the Misty Mountains, to be honest with you, otherwise the clansmen that they're going to be sending up here to try and hold is going to get absolutely destroyed by Lothlorien's melee troops. So I somewhat doubt actually that this force from Boptanta is going to be able to hold on for all that long, especially considering there's only one unit of archers that's actually moving forward to help them, the other one's pulling back a little bit. These Eastron clansmen need to get forward as well, they at least have the full armour upgrades. But if I were Lothlorien, I would definitely want these units gone. I would not want Rhun to be gaining any sort of foothold in the upper reaches of this settlement. We actually haven't really seen this part of the settlement ever used in a battle on this map before. So it would be interesting to see if Rhun actually do manage to get that far. I mean, certainly, I would imagine that Lothlorien are probably not going to allow them to do such. Lorenand Axemen, just one unit of Lorenand Axemen, to be honest with you, as long as the zone is narrow enough, should be enough to slaughter all of these Eastron clans, which is a lot of men that will be gone. Not a lot of quality on this line here that Rhun can rely on to help shore up all their numbers. You need a good mix of numbers with some quality at the centre for this sort of thing to work generally, and that is certainly not going to be the case here, as these elves immediately start to carve into the Eastron clans on one level of armour upgrade. Certainly not going to be enough on this occasion to do the business. Over here, in the buildings, you can see that Rhun, the other part of Boptanta's army, still just remaining on this higher ground. You see half the settlement already in the possession of the attackers. Dale need to make a choice here as well. I mean, they've got their units all sort of spread out, but if I were Dale, I would just retreat right now. There's no way that you're going to sort of save these little areas and pockets of resistance from getting crushed between the Runic and Umbar players, so I would just retreat up to here, help shore things up for Lothlorien, and rely on your sheer missile strength shooting into choke points to try and win you this battle. So I think that's what they're going to have to try and do. Dale have gone for a very, very heavy missile presence. Well, Variag mercenaries firing into the Lorenand Axemen, but they're actually doing more damage, I think, to their own men. They are hitting the Lorenand Axemen, but shields are pointing the right way at least. I definitely wouldn't let free hits occur onto my Lorenand Axemen for free. But I mean, it could be worse. The addition of that friendly fire is okay. I mean, it's kind of like breaking even for Lothlorien. Again, moving forward with the spears, I would have just kept the Axemen in there. The Axemen are going to be able to far more efficiently deal with a unit like the Eastron Clansmen. Pretty much the kind of unit they're best at, really, with their higher attack scores. It's going to be all too easy for them. But it's clear to me, like, if I were on the defence here, if I were Lothlorien, I would see that Rhun, not wanting to be overly committed to this assault that they're laying down, these Eastron Clansmen still holding their position down on the lower ground, I would just go forward and squash this resistance that's up here. Seems to be a bit of a ceasefire going on here. I wonder if it's a grace period that neither of these two players have really observed so far. And I kind of doubt that, because Umbar are rather rapidly coming up on Bacon Soup's defensive position over here, but he is now sort of getting the idea that this is not an area he's going to be able to hold on to for any length of time whatsoever, as Umbar start to menace the rear part of this settlement. So again, with a lot of quality at their disposal as well. Nara and Aru Sentinels and now Krondas Legion leading the way, both of which more defensive units, but on the higher end of things. Going to be interesting to see how the Warlords of Umbar are used, because they're going to have to be saved until later, I think. There's definitely going to be no action happening around the outer edge of this settlement. You can see actually as well Lake Town Infantry firing into nothing, actually. This is a unit that appears to be on fire at will still as well, and they're firing up into the air. Very limited amount of ammunition. Pretty inaccurate as well, kind of a militia tier archer, so this isn't really going to achieve anything at all. And of course, with a composition like Dale's, they may have a lot of archers, but to me that just solidifies the fact that they need to use them efficiently. Can't afford to be wasteful, even with the ammunition from the Lake Town units. Over here, meanwhile, Lothlorien is really just poised and ready for the kill, to be honest with you. These two units are not going to last all that long. And this is pretty much as far as we've seen the attackers get up this side of things in the past. So it'll be interesting to see if that is the case this time. Still some Lorien Axemen again. Like a combination of Axemen and Spears is a very nice combination for Lothlorien. Obviously nice and damaging axes, and the heavy Elven Spears, of course, have got the ability to hold the line for a good amount of time. And then there's the Warriors for the even higher damage combined with the AP. Now what's going on here? They seem to have lost some of their artillery pieces. What's happened? Has it slid off the side? No, it doesn't look like it. What's going on with this thing? Classic Medieval 2 siege pathfinding. Absolutely garbage. I mean, I don't think Dale's going to be able to move it any further. I think they're just going to have to sort of accept the fact that it's here. So I don't know where the rest of that artillery piece is. Well, there it is, but this one doesn't seem all that eager. Maybe they've just run out of steam, these two lads. They're just tired. And now they're very slowly pushing this artillery piece along. So I mean, I would assume this is a grace period, looking at this. So yeah, I'll make a cut, and actually no, it does look as though we're actually getting underway once again. Never mind, as soon as I say that, Lothlorien does oblige, and finally, we're through messing around. I mean, Rhun have decided to put these units up here. If there's a grace period, he's being very liberal with its use if he thinks that he can basically cut out this entire hillside walk. So if I were Lothlorien, I would absolutely just move in and say, no, 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 you're not taking that much territory from us. And this one unit of Eastron Clansmen is now going to get absolutely overwhelmed. I mean, this is the sort of thing, this is a good idea from Lothlorien. Absolutely the right way to go about things. This unit of archers in behind is not going to last all that much longer. Is Rhun going to send over reinforcements? No, they are not. So even if these two units are completely killed off, it's not the worst thing in the world for the attackers. It is almost a complete waste though, because these clansmen are really not going to... They're really going to struggle to get any kind of kills on Lorien Spearmen and Lorien Axeman. Still, it's a good start for the defenders, which they will need, because I think this is going to be a battle which is, honestly, the attackers... There are two ways they can really handle this. Looking at the composition that Dale have brought, and obviously just the nature of Dale and Lothlorien in general, it's obvious that missiles, oh dear, there's the siege, doing its thing, glitching into the cliff. And now the Misty Mountains catapult starting to fire in, and actually two misses, but one direct hit right into the centre of the Barding Herd, which are a potentially very dangerous unit. Of the halberdiers on display today, I'd say this is probably my favourite, because of how tanky they are. Tankier than the Gamprim, certainly tankier than the Heavy Goblin Halberds, the most expensive of the three, but worth that extra expense for me, with that heavy lamella and the big round shields they also wear. Meanwhile, yeah, this has gone about as well as you'd expect for Rhun. I imagine if we have a cursory glance there, there really is not really much in the way of elven bodies. There are a couple, but not much. Utterly dominant in melee there, and Boctanta forced backwards. And still, over on this side of the river, there's really only this bit of runic resistance. Again, if I were Lothlorien, I would be tempted to come down here and kill this, because getting across these bridges is going to take some time. If they do move to do that, you can always pull back. I mean, it is risky. It might prove to be more trouble than it's worth, but it would add some interest when you're playing in a game to not just sit in your shell and take advantage of maybe the attackers spreading themselves a little bit too thin in places. I always do enjoy it when the defenders decide to be aggressive and try and turn the tables a little bit. Meanwhile, I mean, this is not going to go too well. I mean, the Dalian archer companies are firing away, the Dalian bowmen doing their thing, but I think it's pretty clear that Bacon Soup is on the newer end of playing, because this line was not all that well constructed. A single unit of spears stood in the middle of a rather large choke point that they could have set up, and as a result the Alcarondas Legion easily able to circumvent the front line and get into the Dalian bowmen. I mean, there is a decent crossfire going on here, but that's only really going to matter if they can kill off these units quickly enough. I mean, I suppose like there's good damage on the Alcarondas Legion here, but the real problem here is going to be the quality on the front line. Dalian Spearmen and Barding Herd are all well and good, but Alcarondas Legion backed up with Naru and Aru Sentinels are a whole different ball game. Heavy Goblin Infantry here. They're actually pulling back though, which I find interesting. Some Gobbos on the front line would be useful just to pad the line out a bit. E-strong crossbows coming in, and this could actually be a bit of a mistake by the attackers as well. Like, overwhelming force all at once I think is the best way to deal with a really archer heavy build like this, especially when gaps have immediately started to appear in the enemy lines. But as it is, it doesn't look like any of the attackers are really in for that, which actually will play pretty heavily, I think, into the hands of a composition like Dale's, where they've gone so heavily into their archers. Eventually it could still bite them, of course, because they have a very limited amount of infantry that they can actually commit to these kind of fights, and eventually their ammunition supply will run dry, as it has for these Lake Town infantrymen already. Now they can fill their secondary role as light infantry. Don't be fooled by the heavy infantry tooltip, that is not what they are. Lightly armoured, certainly not a heavy duty killer for the front line. Lothlorien meanwhile still just hanging out. Forward now comes Rhun with Boctanta sending forward his mercenaries and his E-strong clansmen. This would be the moment I would seriously consider as Lothlorien coming down this hill, because now it's clear that Rhun don't want to come up this way. They instead perhaps want to join their forces to get through this one choke point over here, try and sideswipe the Dalian archers that are just in behind, which they will succeed in doing unless a unit of melee infantry gets down here. There are some Galatharan Blade Masters which will be just the ticket against a unit like the E-strong clansmen. There are quite a few units of clansmen over here. Lothlorien could come down here and also do the same to Rhun by sideswiping their archers. Dale trying to reorganise themselves. In comes the Warlords of Umbar through the gap. Whether they had enough time to get up, or space to get up to charge speed, is debatable, but they've definitely worried the Dalian lines. The Dalian archers now not able to fire with this unit of knights right up in their faces. But now they're going to have to go back through the Lake Town infantry. A few of these knights do fall. Lots of arrows flying all over the place after all. But this Dalian front line is going to be overwhelmed here, although that's a lot of arrows going into these pikemen. It's interesting that a lot of the units sent forward have been sort of the polearm units for Umbar. It's interesting in general that Umbar have been the one to actually take the lead over here. I would have thought that both Rhun and especially the Misty Mountains would be better equipped for doing that. Umbar are more of a finisher faction with their quality. And especially seeing as a lot of these units on the front line are really the only armoured units you're likely to see, I'd imagine Rhun would have found that to be a better fight, but that's really being quite nitpicky. At least someone did take the lead. And now these E-strong clansmen getting into the side, those Galatharan Blade Masters, overwhelmed in terms of numbers, but they will get a decent amount of kills. These archers meanwhile are getting pushed back up the hill slowly but surely now that Rhun have got them in melee. This front line will be swallowed whole. These Lake Town infantrymen, I mean, there's still the matter of this Dalian bowman unit up on this hill firing away. Those E-strong crossbows as well have taken a decent amount of damage. I mean, it's been a messy defense over here by the defenders, but it hasn't necessarily worked against them, I would say. I think Dale, despite being a little bit all over the place, they have managed to make it work decently enough for them. Galatharan Blade Masters down here, 2 units of Galatharan Blade Masters actually on the front line, now being backed up by a unit of Lake Town pikemen. I mean, that'll be decent against these E-strong clans. With that one unit of Galatharan Blade Masters, it did take quite a while for reinforcements to actually make it to them. Still a lot of archers in the background there, but Variag mercenaries, good in the skirmish fight. Certainly better than the crossbowmen, but these crossbows are now not the target of the archers, which is going to be a problem because they do have clear shots into the reinforcements that are coming down here. Some Lake Town infantry also adding themselves to the front line. Again, how good they're going to be is going to be very debatable against most opponents. Crossbows is going to rip through them as well, as they do with most things. Lake Town infantry and Eastern clansmen are probably relatively even in melee, maybe the slight edge to the Eastern clansmen when they're upgraded though. You're really talking about lower end infantry when you're talking about both, really. Of course, they're blackguards, they're charging into melee, so they must have used up their ammunition in helping to finish off the initial Dalian line. And I know they've still got their javelins in their hands, which is all the more confusing then why they're actually engaging in melee right here and now. Yeah, Umbar still moving forward, these Dalian bowmen. Now out of ammunition by the looks of things, pulling out their axes, trying to get back into the defensive shape, but they're kind of cut off from their allies at this point, and I'd be very surprised if they don't break off here. The kind of units that Umbar have sent forward are pretty significant. They're also getting hit by crossbows and the like. They're not actually that bad in melee, Dale's heavier archers, so they can at least chip in, but they're definitely not on the same sort of level as actual units of line infantry. Guardian marksmen back here. They're probably the best example of that. Definitely capable of looking after themselves in melee. Not the sort of thing that you can just ignore their abilities in melee for, like you can with some archers. Well, I'm amazed this unit hasn't broken yet. They are wavering. They're in with Alcarondas Legion, a large amount of Balchoth, and moving through the area. Of course, our blackguards going to get into position, potentially with javelins, I would imagine. Still some axe guard. There's rangers down. Oh no, what are they firing at? What are they firing at? Whatever they're firing at, it cannot be a particularly good shot. Yeah, no, it's not. They're firing at the Dalian bowmen. That is a frightful waste of rangers, that is. Especially considering that I didn't see Rhun bring their shadow bows, so... Ugh. Rangers can be so devastating. Well, I mean, now the window, effectively, for Lothlorien's counter-attack down this hill has pretty much closed with the arrival of a large force of goblins and the troll drummers, so the Misty Mountains are going to be the ones taking the lead over here, I would assume. Which again is an interesting choice, because Misty Mountains, very much a quantity-focused faction, going into a narrow engagement against Lothlorien. You'd imagine there's only really going to be one winner there, although to be fair, even the Misty Mountains are holding back quite a lot, so the attackers being a little bit more on the cautious side, which is not... It's not as... How to explain? It's not the kind of mistake that I would normally think it would be. Like, normally I'm not all that into being really, really slow and methodical going through a settlement, but on this occasion I can see why, because there's so many archers to try and deal with that actually taking the slow approach like this doesn't really allow the defenders, especially if they're being a little bit more lax with their use of ammunition, as it seems like they are actually being, especially Dale. They're going to run out of ammunition eventually, and then you can bring the hammer down. Umbar, of course, are pretty much the exception to that rule, because they have gone, you know, pretty heavy onto the front line so far, and they have taken quite a bit in terms of losses, but let's see. Again, these javelins can't have used up all their ammunition. They're being committed to melee, which is another really strange decision, I have to say, from the attackers. Customers Rangers moving close to the front line. I mean, they do have the opportunity to maybe get into a good position, but if the defenders are wise, they'll immediately target them down as soon as they poke around this corner with all of the archers they have waiting. Pretty much a tailor-made defence to dealing with Rangers head on. Still Dale pumping arrows into the advancing attackers. That front line won't last for much longer after all. Let's see what's happening over here. So Lothlorien still just waiting for the next wave of trouble to come their way. Snaga Skirmish is getting into position though. It'd be interesting to see if Lothlorien's paying attention here, because these Snaga have got an easy shot into these Lorenan spears, and this is a fantastic way to get value. This is one of the reasons why cheap javelins like this can be so useful. They may have a low base damage, but they're still armor piercing. Yeah, now Lothlorien does realise, but only after that first volley comes their way. They're going to charge forward, but it'll be a simple matter, I think, to overwhelm them once they do. Another volley hits them. Another 6 or 7 elves fall by the wayside. The heavy goblin infantry will now move forward to engage and prevent the Snaga from being closed down in melee. Now, of course, the heavy goblin infantry will still lose this fight. There's a lot of support nearby, which the attackers should be able to make good use of to overwhelm this unit of Lothlorien spears. At least you'd hope that would be the case. It looks as though the attackers only want to use this one unit of gobos. The Lothlorien spears not wanting to stick around waiting for the attackers to actually notice this, they're going to retreat. Not in the way of, well, there is a couple of units of Lothlorien archers over here, which, to be fair, I mean, you might not want to use ammunition on Snaga skirmishes like this, but you kind of have to, otherwise you will end up taking losses, as we just saw. What have we here? Catapult trying to fire as the Baltroth tribesmen move forward, so they have actually managed to blow through that outer defence. There's still, or there was still, a single Dalian archer over there. There's still some elves fighting on the front line as well, the Galatharin Blade Masters, going toe to toe with what's left of the Eastron clansmen, but both units at this point but shadows of their former selves. Let's see here, Sword Masters of Esgaroth, brought more into line with the rest of the Dalian style. It's very sort of, well, they're getting their Baltroth tribesmen in position. They're being shot point blank, I think. Yeah, they are, by the Dalian bowmen. It's kind of not the sort of thing you normally see. Archers sort of this close to javelins and just firing into the front of them. Yeah. Meanwhile, I think we're going to start to see the shifting of the battle over to this side now. I think we've started to see that battle temporarily wind down into more of a skirmish phase, whereas over here the Misty Mountains starting to probe this Lothlorien defensive line. Albeit not too successfully initially with those goblin infantrymen as they break off. They should return. 83 men, there's enough of them, they should return. This unit of Lothlorien spears has taken damage, but they've also given a decent amount back to the goblin infantry. Oh god. Not this guy again. Well, regardless, there's no town centre on this map, so we shouldn't start going mental. Snaga are going to keep moving forward. I mean, Lothlorien are going to have to make a choice here. Either they're going to have to retreat behind the cliffside wall, which will allow the Misty Mountains to sort of occupy this area here, or they're going to have to try and shoot the Snaga skirmishers and force them back that way. You can't have your cake and eat it too if a player is being a little bit more on the ball like they seem to be there. Dalian bowmen finishing off the very depleted Alcarondas Legion now. What have we got back here? Poison arrows finding their marks. Primarily going after the more heavily armoured Umbar pikes, but actually pointing the wrong way. So the shields, which is part of the reason why the Iron Sentinels normally don't mind going up against archers, being completely negated there. Marshmoons of the Wood, of course, and a map like this, breaking the enemy is a potentially really useful tool. Castamir's Rangers firing in. Again, I'm not really sure they're being used all that efficiently, to be honest with you. They don't really have a great target to be shooting into from there. They also appear to be shooting up in the air, which is yet another example of being a little bit wasteful. There's also the Athala Rangers, which are now firing in. Obviously the Rangers for the defenders firing away with the support. Obviously then you've got body piercing, you've got poison arrows. Athala Rangers going back into hiding. So just a few volleys to give the attackers something to think about. Boktanta's Gamperim are going to try and move forward to support this Baltroth tribesman line, but they're going to immediately be sent back the other way. Combination of poison arrows and being engaged in melee by heavy elven axemen. What did that hit? Nothing. Yeah, the Gamperim defeat almost a certainty, to the surprise of absolutely no one, and so far in this battle we have seen examples of the attackers just filtering in units in quantities that are far too small, and the wrong type of unit as well. Gamperim are definitely not the sort of unit you want to be sending into that kind of mess. That was actually a good hit though from the Misty Mountains catapult. It's rare you see such pinpoint accuracy from that distance, but managing to shave off a good amount of the manpower there in that unit of Lothlorien warriors, so a bit of a silver lining to that assault for the attackers, but I'm not sure it was worth an entire unit of Baltroth tribesmen and low Gamperim. Going on here. I heard the whiz of javelins then. Well, I mean, they're just sort of, they're really taking their time here, the attackers, but again, over here on this side of things, sort of attacking into this Lothlorien defensive position, there really isn't anything in terms of any quality. There's clansmen, heavy goblins. Really the highest quality unit they have over here are the trolls and the heavy goblin spears, which like that is not going to be sufficient to break through even a sort of relatively half-hearted Lothlorien defence. And over here there's plenty of axemen and spears backed up by archers, so not really sure. So far this one unit of spears has been all Lothlorien has needed to hold the line. That may prove to still be the case. This unit of Variag mercenaries might just about have the numbers to overwhelm them. We shall see. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle, indeed. Oh, with the unit of Snaga. I mean, the Snaga skirmish has really been the only unit to pull their weight over on this side of things so far. More goblins heading across. Some slightly more serious units now, with some Mountaineeric Coast and Halberds, but when they'll actually be committed is anyone's guess, because I think what we're probably going to be settling into here, especially over on this side of things, is a skirmish phase, which, from an attacking point of view, I'd be fairly disappointed in. Like, the attackers are still over here with a lot of their units sort of pitching their tents way back here, not really being a help to anyone. As the attackers, it's sort of you have to be the ones to take the initiative. You're not really going to hit another catapult at that distance with flaming shot. Like the defenders, they're within their rights to just sort of sit here and wait. They've got an archer heavy army. They're the defenders. You know, if the attackers, you know, they just need to be a little bit more proactive here, I think. I mean, considering the length of the battle, I don't think that's going to happen for the foreseeable. And this unit of Lothlorien spears still doing the business. Surely at some point this one unit will be overwhelmed. Eventually, as they filter in their low tier units one by one, the attackers should be able to overcome this one unit at the very least. Victory is a distinct possibility for the heavy goblin infantry, but they're still shaken, so this was even the unit that routed and returned. So at least the goblins are into recycling. Albeit it's certainly not the fastest way to get through an enemy line. Variag mercenaries moving forward. They almost certainly still have ammunition, which is probably going to result in the elves needing to deal with them. Do they still have ammunition? I mean, they've got their axes out, so maybe not. This one unit of Variag mercenaries, though, I mean, they are really not going to achieve all that much this far behind enemy lines. I mean, they're going to try and get into the Lothlorien archers to do some kind of damage here. I mean, Variag mercenaries are not terrible in melee, but you're talking about going up against heavy elven archers in melee. There really isn't much of a contest. They might kill off a few of these units. I mean, the charge killed off 4 or 5. Lothlorien archers now beginning to fire, so layered archers means that it's not too much of a concern, really. Some clansmen now moving in. Secondary unit of elven spears now heading forward to help hold the line. This is a little bit more like it now from the attackers. Now that the heavy goblin spears are being mobilised, more goblins. They need to be ready to reinforce the area, maybe with some halberds and some Mountaineeric Coast as well, to keep this assault going. Otherwise it could very quickly end up running out of steam, especially seeing as the elves have so quickly swung into action. You know, those Lothlorien archers have taken a couple of losses, but it's not going to take too much more to finish off these Variag mercenaries with the unit of Lothlorien axemen in position. The elven archers now providing the overwatch fire. It's going to be so valuable to them on this front line. Another unit of Lothlorien axemen charging into this axe and spear combination with the archers in behind. Should definitely be quite efficient here. Snaga skirmishers routing and broken. That is the downside to a unit like that. They can be very efficient, but also very easy to break. Meanwhile, flag rim moving forward. I mean, this catapult is sticking out slightly. Fire arrows from the Bardian marksman, so eager to try and break the flag rim here. And if the attackers continue to send forward units one at a time, that will be pretty easy to do, honestly. They're not going to have support close enough by to stabilise that morale. Overwhelming numbers coming at them in melee. Fiery projectiles hitting them in the back. You can see why. Morale has stabilised with the proximity of some reinforcements heading their way. Is that shadow bows? It is shadow bows. They're being sent for very close to the enemy lines, and immediately they're going to start to be targeted down, I think, or at least they damn well should be. They're shaken now just because they've taken enough losses. In come the Lothlorien Swordmasters, blocking the advance of the flag rim. Any more reinforcements? Crossbows, shadow bows. There goes that one unit of flag rim. Reinforcements took too long. and they took too many numbers. So use of the fire arrows, actually very good there. In conjunction with the poison arrows, very nicely done. Meanwhile, those Variag mercenaries have been utterly destroyed by Lothlorien's initial force. Over here though, that initial unit of spears has been overcome, but now another unit of spears and axemen awaits. At the very least, the heavy goblin spears should be offer a little bit more rigidity to the front line of the attackers here, but still no actual penetration, I don't think. And then there's still the cave troll drummers holding things together as best they can. Snaga skirmishers coming up. There's still units down here which probably need to be committed, but yeah, this is like one of those attacks that I think it's going to end up being pretty half-hearted. I mean, they're probably going to win the melee engagement, but I think overall Lothlorien can afford to be pretty pleased with how things have gone. Over here, certainly, there's even more of a problem with just committing units in far too small a quantity to actually do anything significant to the defending line. And it's possible that what they want to do is wear down the attackers' ammunition. On this occasion, I think I'd be more in favour of just being really aggressive, because I just don't think they have the infantry to hold you back, and also the organisation of the defenders, I'd say, is pretty questionable. Their lines have been pretty messy, there have been gaps that have appeared, and I think if you were the attackers you could take advantage of that by just being hyper aggressive, but the attackers so far seem to want to take this slow, play the attrition game, and it has not worked in their favour so far. Slowly but surely they are taking losses. They could still go on to win this battle, of course. They still have a lot of very effective tools, but perhaps not the way they wanted the battle to go so far. Over here, Eastron clansmen and heavy goblins struggling really on the front line against these elves. Lothlorien doing their thing. Snaga routing off once again. That might be the end of them, actually. Don't know if they'll return. They might. I mean, there's 66 of them. That's the second time they've routed. Mountain Orc Berserkers revealing themselves, a little bit more potency in melee with damage, but against elves, this is the kind of unit they'll eat for breakfast because of the lower melee defense that such a unit entails. More Snaga skirmishers are moving forward, so more javelin men ready for the front line. Yet another attempt from Rhun here to just sort of filter in some units and hope for the best. I don't think it's going to work. Again, the whiz of bolts overhead. Flag rim. I mean, there's some decent hits, but like the problem is, like, this unit of Bardian marksmen already looks like they're out of ammunition, which, to be fair, means that those crossbow bolts would be better served going after something else. The Bardian marksmen are okay in melee, but they're definitely not the sort of thing by which this battle is going to be won nor lost. I mean, this is maybe a little bit wasteful from the defenders as well. These March Warns of the Wood are just going to get destroyed by this column of flag rim. They might be out of ammunition, but you don't need to send them in to just be killed like that. They can still form up some meat on the front line if you need it, but not like that. Sort of massive Escroth forming up around the Lake Town units. Barding Herder there, still Dalian Bowmen, Woodland Protectors, a lot of units, including the mighty Blackshots. Carmel Shadowbows moving forward, another force of Blackguards, some Gamp Rim. So maybe a little bit more serious over on this side now, the attackers. Maybe seeing the ammunition start to be a little bit lesser. Ah, Snow Trolls. I mean, Snow Trolls don't carry quite the same level of devastation as something like the Olag High or the Trolls of the White Hand. But I mean, they are still going to be enough to actually do some genuine damage to the elves that are on this front line, which is exactly what they needed, especially with the addition of the Mountaineer at Coast. So the Misty Mountains finally cranking up the pressure on the elves, and the elves actually not all that ready to absorb this pressure. I mean, in comes another unit of reinforcements now, Lorinand warriors. Another volley coming in from the archers doing some decent damage. These Mountaineer at Coast will certainly struggle against the blows raining down from these Lorinand warriors. It's going to be pretty grisly for them. The Snow Trolls, though, doing some good damage on the front line. They will grind to a halt fairly quickly against damaging Lothlorien infantry. But progress has been made. The question is there reinforcements on the way up here? There is, but it's one unit of Mountaineer at Coast, some range support. That could be sufficient, to be fair. Get some Mountain Oak Coast in there, get some range support to solidify your gains. This is a little bit more like it over on this side as well. Although I say that, it looks like Rhun. Most of these units are actually ranged units that are really close to the melee fight. Dale instead have decided to kind of launch a bit of a counter-attack. It's a relatively small one, but it's still fairly significant. Let's see here. Oof. And there comes the highly damaging ammunition from the Watchers of the Goldenwood Silverthorn arrows, which will of course interrupt the firing potentially of any ranged units that they do hit, make it a little bit more difficult for them to do their thing. That is blood spray though, so I'm a little bit concerned. If I get too close, crashing will ensue. Yeah, now all the melee units from Rhun are starting to rout, and I would honestly carry this counter-attack on. Most of these units are ranged, which you can really do a lot of damage to. Of course, their crossbows are routing off, so yeah, the Watchers of the Goldenwood definitely doing their thing there. Athala Rangers also joining in, so it's going to be very costly, that push. But this is the one over here that I think shows more signs of bearing fruit for the attackers. Easterlings heading forwards. The Troll Drummers are on the front line though, which I think is, well actually it does look as though, I think Troll Drummers is more of a desperation move to try and keep the attack going, because the Troll Drummers are going to die fairly easily to stuff like Lorenan Swordmasters. When I say that, it's actually Lorenan Archers, but there's still Axemen in there as well. And of course, as soon as you lose those Troll Drummers, all of these Goblins will lose that morale boost that they're getting, and it will be easier for them to break. But with more Host on the front line, I mean, the Host are going to be far better at standing up to this Elven pressure. They're still struggling against the huge AP damage coming their way, but it's going to go slightly better for them than just the standard heavy Goblins. Maybe with a little bit more damage from the Mountain Orc Berserkers, this will be exactly what the attackers needed. Because there's a really messy fight going on in this choke point over here. Arrows and bolts still whizzing overhead. Still this Misty Mountains catapult over here. Baltroth Tribesmen shifting around. There's not a huge amount of reinforcements back here, to be honest with you. I think the ones that are up here are Misty Mountains units, aren't they? Or are they? No, yeah, they are. Goblin King's bodyguards. There's still some goblins over on this side of the river, actually. Which I think at this point they should probably think about getting over here to maybe support Rhun and Umbar, or double down on their attack up that hill, because if they do neither, those units across the river just aren't really contributing in any way whatsoever. Well, in come the Mountain Orc Berserkers, going to try and do some damage. I mean, Lorien do have decent armour values, to be fair, so AP is not wasted on them as it would be against Linden or even Mirkwood. But the real problem with a unit like the Mountain Orc Berserkers is their low melee defense. The elves can just very easily cut them to ribbons in melee. But I mean, in this sort of fight where it's a little bit messy, you can't really focus on a unit like that too easily. And also now starting to wrap up the line with the addition of another unit of Mountain Orc Coast. The side of this line is starting to crumble, and shock infantry of course doesn't have the same, or at least armour-piercing shock troops like this. The elven melee defense may be better, but they still have the same problem as most heavy axemen do have. Their staying power over a longer period of time is not as high as the Swordmasters that have just arrived now. Woodland Protectors are coming over here, Athala Rangers, and the Blackshot Dragonslayer. So seeing this now as more of a danger, they're sending over a lot more of their higher tier units, and I agree, because I think that this assault over here, to be honest with you, they do have under control. I think the quality on the front, I mean, Flag Grim, the one issue that they might have is this unit over here, the Narrow Arrow Sentinels, but there's only so many of them now. And I think if needs be, I mean, the Flag Grim are kind of winning, but that's because they're going up against the Lake Town Infantry. They can just plug the gap with some March Wardens. That's a decent spot for those tribesmen, to be fair, firing their javelins into the side of this line, so perhaps not all is lost. But what sort of units do they have ready to pour in? Harbingers, that's a decent one. Carmel's chosen. They don't really have much in the way of numbers. A lot of it is ranged units or really battered and bruised units of infantry that have routed from the front line and can be recommitted. In a pure numbers sense, I suppose they're right. This is exactly the sort of fight where Barding Herd should actually be pretty decent. Doing their thing, getting right up close to the action here, the catapult. They can scarcely miss from here if they do start firing now. Will they do so? Will they be able to? Catapults, of course, and Lines of sight are a funny thing when it comes to siege. Over here, meanwhile, committal of the Lothlorien Swordmasters has actually only slowed this assault down. The Snaga skirmishers are the thing which seem to be doing a good amount of supporting damage here. Another unit of them breaks, but there's still this unit down here still doing its thing. The drummers giving the Misty Mountains just that extra bit of staying power in melee, and slowly but surely the attackers are making gains over here. Lothlorien have been kind of outmaneuvered, and they've been put into a situation where the attackers are able to make good use of their ranged units. And there go the arrows flying by. Blackshot Dragon says, what are they actually firing at though with their wind lances? Only a couple of the units are actually firing, so very slow DPS, but reinforcements are here. Some Lake Town pikemen and some Barding Herd. I mean, not insignificant. Phalanx units will be very useful for holding this line. But of course, the more they send over here, the less they have to try and reinforce over here. And with that, you know, with the attacks coming in from the javelins, doing some good damage there to the March Wardens of the Wood, but Watchers of the Golden Wood as well, doing some good damage. Catapult. Keldon River Patrol still have their javelins. Have they got anything back here, the defenders, other than the March Wardens? I don't think they do. I mean, they still potentially could retreat up to here, the very peak of the settlement, the highest point. But it's a fairly wide choke point, to be honest with you, so they're not really going to gain anything by retreating back that far. And they will in fact lose by showing their backs to the enemy. But yeah, the Dalian reinforcements have had the desired effect. Barding Herd squeezing in, breaking the Mountaineer at coast, the heavy goblin spears running out of steam as the Lake Town pikes arrived and got their phalanx down. Now though, they do need to retreat out of the view of the heavy goblin archers and crossbowmen and javelins, the Snaga. The longer they stay there, the more losses they're going to take. Still some elves trying to go after the cave troll drummers. Don't know how well that's going to go necessarily. Ooh, hello. The catapult is firing away. Maybe the units just in front of them are just a little too close, but they are able to hit the Keldon River Patrol and force them into a retreat. Let's see now. What we got down there? Eastron crossbows, getting a few clipping shots. I mean, they're doing some damage. Problem is though, like, the majority of the support, like, yeah, Blackshot Dragon Slayer shooting into the side. That's going to be the end of this front line, I would imagine. Dalian Bowman and Swordmasters of Escaroth still holding down the front line. There goes another of the catapults, but I don't think it matters. I think one of their catapults glitching into the cliff has kind of meant that that catapult can't really move anymore, so I think that ceased to be an issue at that point. Let's go and see what's happening over here. Barding Herd moving into position, getting shot all the while by those crossbows. Yeah, Dale needs to get these units out of harm's way here. Otherwise, all you're really going to be doing is feeding kills into this rabble. Still the cave troll drummers shaken. They need to get them out of there, really. They're just sort of stood in no man's land here. They can be retreated back behind this goblin line. And now Dale retreating back behind the safety of the cliff, which is a good move. They're still firing away, the Watchers of the Golden Wood, still continuing to do their damage. Don't know what they're going after. They might be going after the catapult crew, but to be honest with you, that's kind of unnecessary at this point, I think. Of course, their crossbows trying to fire in. Yeah, a bit of a Pyrrhic victory for whoever ends up winning over here, but I think the defenders will take it because the attackers sent forward a lot to try and smash through here. And they weren't really successful. There's still some bits and pieces hanging around. In the end, what may prove to be a bit of a difference maker in this fight is how archer heavy the defenders decided to go, because as the battle wears on and ammunition becomes more scarce for both sides, out of ammunition archers might not be enough to finish off the waves of attackers that are coming at them. Which might be the difference here. It might be a question of composition rather than gameplay. Lornan Swordmasters being finished off here by crossbowmen. There's the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen as well, who are capable of dishing out a rather incredible amount of punishment. More gobos crossing the river. I should say, briver. I'm losing my mind, I swear. Aro Sentinels still fighting on the front line, so really the one unit has been able to hold things down for the attackers. Unsurprisingly, of course, they're very comfortable in an engagement like that, but things have been a little bit messier since the introduction of those skirmishers over there. Javelins. Catapult. I mean, a good hit onto the black shots here could be pretty telling. Ooh, actually going after the back of that front line over there, so this is where things start to get a little bit dicey. Lots of angles for the attackers to use to go after the defenders. With the protectors using some javelins, but again, at this point, I think what the attackers want to do is use some of their sort of high ticket or higher ticket skirmishers, like their standard crossbows and some of their fancier stuff like the Dragon's Wrath. A few good volleys from those and they'll probably feel comfortable enough to just overwhelm the defenders. If they spend too much time focusing on that, they could end up losing more on the front line. What are these javelins doing? Don't even know if they're hitting, to be honest with you. Ooh, now that's an interesting unit to reveal. Keren Amroth Rangers, even more deadly than the Athala, both at range and in melee with their two-handed sword. The real question now is... Ooh, those crossbows need to retarget and go after the Keren Amroth Rangers here before they start firing into that blob. Or they could just stand here and be utterly wasted, which would be a bit of a nail in Lothlorien's coffin, I think. Well, they are firing now. Whether they get enough of an opportunity to... what are they going after, I wonder? Going after the Nirun Royal Guard. I mean, it's not going to last too long because the Warlords of Umbar, who are still alive, are going to move forward. Getting a charge into the Rangers, and even a unit of very depleted Knights is going to absolutely dominate lighter archers off a charge. This is one of the problems with Rangers. Like, if you can really isolate them, they are pretty squishy, and that is what Lothlorien is going to find now. That could be fairly decisive. They're still alive and they should still have all their ammunition, but they're being forced backwards. In comes some Lake Town pikemen, which is going to force the Knights at least to retreat. Shadowbows moving forward. They still have their elite infantry back here, which could still be useful. All of this is rather dependent on the Misty Mountains attacks still continuing, because the Misty Mountains are the only real army at this point. It really is, for Rhun and Umbar, it's really just remnants. Woodland Protectors holding the front line, but it's a lot of goblins. It's a lot of goblins they're having to try and deal with here. One archers back here. Have your goblin crossbowman. The problem here is there's not an awful lot of quality here, but there is a lot of quantity, and I don't know if Lothlorien can actually afford to send over the kind of numbers that it would normally take for the Lothlorien to fairly comfortably deal with an assault from the Misty Mountains like this. Halberds on the front line in limited quantities, but still. Phalanx like that can definitely be quite useful indeed. See here. They're routing. I thought they were going to come over to try and help out. Just another depleted unit, try and keep this assault going for as long as they possibly can, but not going to last too much longer. Catapult crew, shadow bows, even lower end units like the men of Lake Town, which are sort of driving this kind of counter attack at this point, are going to be too much just because of the phalanx. As long as the Lake Town pikemen keep their formation, they're going to be absolutely fine. And that is a problem for the attackers, unless they send forward the Harbingers or something like that, but that will immediately draw the ire of the Watchers and the Black Shots. So I can understand their trepidation for doing that. It is over here where the attackers are going to have to try and make something happen. But even over here, the Barding Herd have re-emerged, and their AP and also their general solidity is going to be really effective against the Misty Mountains, honestly. Especially in this sort of situation, they're really pushing back. If they push in now with some extra reinforcements, they could really break the back of this assault. This is fairly interesting, this, because I think throughout this entire match, I would say the defenders have probably handled things better than the attackers. But because of their composition, they may still end up running out of steam. The kind of units that Dale would really be hoping for in this kind of situation would be like the Dismounted Earls, or even something a little bit fancier like the Paladins. Would be ideal. But they don't have them because they went so archer heavy, which has kind of helped them. They were also, in parts, a little bit wasteful, which could be the difference here between victory and defeat. If the attackers do go on to win, I feel as though it was just because their composition, or the defenders' composition, just wasn't ideally placed or used. But if the defenders do go on to win, I think it will be deserved. Carrying on with Rangers over here. Been a fairly clumsy battle, to be honest with you, from both teams. Hits coming in from these crossbows down here, but they've been glancing hits that they've been landing. Like crossbows, if they get like hits that are flush onto a unit, they'll devastate it. But here they're sort of having to sort of arc their shots, which is not ideal. They can still be damaging like that, and especially considering the margins by which we're working at now. Karen Amroth Rangers firing away into the Harbingers. Harbingers getting behind the house now. Of course, Elven Archers very accurate, so they're pretty comfortable when it comes to finding their marks at ranges like that. The Narun Royal Guard are now presumably going to go after the Karen Amroth Rangers, because their own men are still kind of in the way of these Lake Town pikemen who are continuing to slowly but surely poke and prod their way through the remnants of the runic assault that was up here. Still a goblin there as well. Crossbowman and one of the catapult crew. Dragon's Wrath crossbows firing in, but actually a lot of those bolts are going to be blocked by these wrecks of catapults, or just abandoned catapults, which actually will probably be pretty good if they'll, I mean again, like to notice these sort of things in an actual battle is going to be fairly difficult, but if you can keep your unit here, yes, they'll still take a lot of losses, but more of those really, really deadly Dragon's Wrath bolts will be gone. They are taking hits from something, yeah, they're taking hits from Karen Amroth Rangers. So they're going to have to try and get out of there. Still quite a few crossbows down there though. Quite a few ranged units from the attackers as well, to be honest with you, so it may actually turn out in the end that both sides come down to their skirmishers in melee, and if that is the case, stuff like the Black Shots and the Watchers of the Golden Wood will easily give the battle to the defenders, I think. But yeah, these Barding Herd been a really, really solid unit in this fight all throughout. Tough, dependable, the kind of unit they are, meshes well with the kind of opponents they've been facing. The exception to that would have been if they had to go up against Umbar and their superior quality in their pikes and the like, but they never really had to do that. They were up against Rhun and the Misty Mountains, the kind of foes that they will be all too happy to slice into with their Bardiche axes. Returning heavy Goblin Infantry, they won't stick around for very long, although maybe they will. With the arrival of the Goblin King's Bodyguard, that should improve morale somewhat on the front line for the Misty Mountains, keep this attack going for just a little bit longer. We're getting to the point now where I think decisions are going to have to be made. Look at that, Narun Royal Guard getting laid into there by the Watchers of the Golden Wood. Warlord of Umbar, the last remaining Warlord of Umbar, is getting swamped by these Karen Amroth Rangers with their Elven Curve Blades. Oof, that was a pretty vicious volley though, coming in from the Dragon's Wrath crossbowman. It's all well and good sending forward the Narun Royal Guard, but they're going to need the X factor that the Harbingers especially, but also the Carmel's Chosen provide, because to stop those two elite units they're going to have to use something fairly significant like the Black Shots. Black Shots are firing in. They're firing in here to the Royal Guard though. I mean, it is a fair point. Like, if they can kill off the Royal Guard, they're a decent enough unit to use the ammunition on, and then they can save the Black Shots for a full-on melee scrap against the elites that still wait further down the hill. Of course, this is all rather contingent as well on actually winning this fight over here, which, to be honest, the Halberds are here in decent numbers for the Goblins. With the arrival of the Goblin King's Bodyguard, that is looking a little bit more in doubt now, and I think that whole thing about the defenders not really having enough left in the tank to hold might end up proving true. I think maybe the Watchers of the Golden Wood, if they go over there and try and wipe out the Misty Mountains quickly, while they sort of try and delay the advance of the Carmel's Chosen and what's left of Umbar, I think that would probably be the best way to go about things. These units over here are doomed. Lake Town Pikemen, Keldon River Patrol, Catapult Crew, no match whatsoever, but they have the potential to use those. Well, there go. That's actually another unit of Keldon Rippatrol that revealed themselves. Those javelins could be exactly what's needed. And actually, if they lose their bottle here, Umbar going the wrong way. Rhun have already committed themselves here. Rhun needs support. Umbar can't afford to hide in their shell, and I think that's exactly what they're doing with their Harbingers, if I'm being brutally honest. Dragon's Wrath crossbows coming forward. Carrying Amroth Rangers and Black Shots. Getting some good volleys in there. Carmel's Chosen. They're going to obviously get javelined. Point blank javelin. It's going to take more than that to bring down a unit of the Carmel's Chosen's level, but they're going to do better. And I think the Black Shots here, they still have their Wind Lancers out. In come the Royal Guard, they're going to stop the Keldon Rippatrol Catapult crew. They're just going to charge into melee here. I don't know if I'd agree with that. If they still have ammunition, they just need to dump it all into the Carmel's Chosen as quickly as possible and then get into melee. Watchers of the Golden Wood are here. I would send the Watchers of the Golden Wood in now, because this front line is on the verge of collapse, with crossbows getting up and around the flank. It's all well and good the Athala Rangers being here, but those heavy goblin crossbowmen are going to make a nuisance of themselves, and you need this front line to keep it up. I mean, those Barding Herd and the elves that have been fighting alongside them, stuff like the Sword Mass, have done such a good job up till now. Now the line is compromised. Now's the time to send the Watchers of the Golden Wood in. If you hesitate now, it will have all been for nothing. And everything, well, they are, so it's a moot point, but everything I was accusing the attackers of doing, the defenders would have done so at a very ill-opportune time. But with the Athala Rangers and the Watchers of the Golden Wood charging in, that should be enough to rout this unit of heavy goblin crossbows pretty darn quickly, if I'm being honest. I mean, certainly I think the Watchers of the Golden Wood at this point, they and the Harbingers are the two units which are of the highest quality left on the field, but the Harbingers have taken a little bit of damage from archers up till this point, so it's not quite that cut and dry. Harbingers on the front line, along with the Harbingers, along with themselves, no, along with the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, going up against the Black Shots. The Black Shots should lose that fight, to be honest. I mean, the Harbingers, you know, they do have superior numbers, they're the better unit in melee. It's all going to be coming down here to support, I think. Those Karen Amroth Rangers shooting into the backs of the Carmel's Chosen. The key here is still going to be whether these Keldon Rippatrol can get free of this one Spearman, and they're not, because it's that one hero there held on long enough for the Carmel's Chosen to finish off their targets and then get into them. Will they manage to get another volley off though? They're going to need to wear down this, because they're going to lose over here. The attackers will win over here, definitely. They're going to need to do more damage than this, I think, if the defenders are going to win. Those Rangers can slowly but surely do their thing. I mean, the Dragon Slayers, to be fair, they will take their pound of flesh off this front line. The Harbingers, with their support, should win. I say should, because it still says they're going to lose, amazingly enough. Maybe those big anime swords have more in them than I initially gave them credit for. I mean, if that's the case, then the attackers are in trouble, I think. Because they need to sort of rely on winning that fight over there, because like I said, over here the goblins have got nothing on the Watchers of the Golden Wood. By far the strongest unit left in play at this point, and unless they can shoot them, but again they've only got heavy goblin archers at this point, they don't have the crossbows. Like, if they had crossbows they could probably kill them off, but those archers are just not going to do damage quickly enough, and the crossbows actually out of ammunition and in melee are the ones getting sliced up by those elven swords. Heavy goblin crossbows that do have ammunition. This could prove to be interesting. I think I'm losing my voice yet again. I'm trying to record everything in one big lump. Still some Athala Rangers on the front line. So yeah, speed is of the essence here. It's really coming down to the very end of this fight. I mean, the Rangers do have a nice clear shot into the side of the Carmel's Chosen, so the Keldon Rippatrol are still doing something useful. When all is said and done as well, I mean, there's still 23 Karen Amroth Rangers with a few more volleys into the Carmel's Chosen. The Rangers will probably beat them in melee. There goes the Umbar General. Those Dragon Slayers doing a really excellent job so far. I mean, they're such an important unit to Dale. They are going to lose still, but the damage they've done to the Harbingers is substantial, to say the least. And that is going to prove to be very worthwhile. What have we got going on over here? Carmel's Chosen. Those Keldon River Troll actually managing to weasel their way away. Only a few left behind. I'm not so sure about that, Umbar announcer. Yeah, those ranger shots cutting through the Carmel's Chosen. Those Keldon River Troll got away and they still have a bit of ammo. Good volley from them into the Carmel's Chosen, and then the Harbingers still have to make their way through the Rangers, which, I mean, this does mean that this fight is the key. And there's nothing that can beat the Watchers of the Goldenwood unless they shoot them with those heavy goblin crossbows sufficiently. Which, to be fair, they may do, but I think the Athala Rangers here are sort of going to be the sacrificial lambs. They're going to charge downhill, get into the crossbows and prevent them from firing long enough for this front line to just be ripped asunder by the Watchers. Those Goblin King's bodyguard have done a decent job on the front line. Cleaned up the Barding herd. But now they're having to go up against Watchers. It's very close, this, you know. I do think the defenders deserve to win it, but composition is part of the game, choosing your comp, and Dale going for a few too many archers. Well, there goes Haldia. It's not great for him. Please don't tell me the Watchers of the Golden would pull back. No, they weren't. They're taking damage though. It looks like the Watchers will actually fall here. Goblin King's bodyguard doing a good job. I think the units around the Watchers of the Goldenwood at this point, the crossbows have also done a decent job at sort of actually getting some hits on them. Ooh. What have we here? 9 Blackshot Dragon Slayers. Are they going to win? Have they won? Corsair crossbows still alive and still with ammunition. Did the Blackshots just beat the... What is going on with these two guys? Were they Darth Maul? A twin-bladed Dragon Slayer sword. Wild. I mean, over here, it's actually proving to be kind of the opposite of what I thought. I think the attackers are going to win over on that side, and the defenders may very well be able to eke out the victory over here. I mean, this is the Runic General, which is he's just being bully circled here, rather embarrassingly, by Keldon River Patrol. But, I mean, this is interesting here. The Blackshots now, there's still one Harbinger. There's the Corsairs. The Dalian Dragon Slayers now need to get in here and close the gap to the Corsair crossbows quickly. So if they get into melee with them, obviously there's going to be no contest between the two, but it's going to be close. Dragon Slayers, fairly slow. I think they are going to get a volley off here, the Corsairs. Ooh. Well, as soon as we were about to find out the Runic General fell. No, they did make it. They interrupted that shot, so they're going to waver and they're going to break. That one Harbinger is not going to make the difference either with the Keldon River Patrol and the Keren Amroth Rangers on the way here, so yeah, they're going to break. One Harbinger remains. So now the question is, the Misty Mountains, who of all the attacks have probably done the best for me, they are victorious. 24 Goblin King's bodyguard. There's still ammunition on these crossbows as well, which I think is going to be fairly substantial, to be honest. For Watchers of the Goldenwood routing with the loss of Haldia. Well, I mean, 8 Dragon Slayers, 40 River Patrol, and however many Rangers, it was 20 or so. I think the Goblin King's bodyguard are going to be too tough for those units to bring down because there isn't enough Blackshots left in melee. And I think the addition of those crossbows still having a couple of volleys left in them is going to be too much. So I do think from here, to be honest, I think the attackers win from here. I don't see a way in which they don't. Unless all of the support is killed off very quickly. It's not beyond the realms of possibility, but I think the morale boost from the Goblin King's bodyguard and Azog himself marching with them is going to be too much. Let's go up to ×2 speed. Let's go to ×6 while everyone gets into position. I think this is going to be the problem here. I think a couple of volleys from the crossbows is going to send the Keldon River Patrol into a panic. And they do need those numbers so that the Blackshots and the Rangers don't get swamped. What is this over here on the front line? Still something apparently in and amongst all these bodies. Well, I think that what I feared is going to come to pass here. I think ultimately there are the black shots, but I think it was a question of composition here, because I think the defenders played this better. The initial defences were still clumsy and there was room for improvement, which, I mean, when you consider that, when you're down to margins like this, any side really could have won, depending on how it was played. There are the Rangers, but yeah, Dale and Lothlorien are a little bit separate from one another. Goblin King's bodyguard heading over here. Yeah, crossbows still with ammo. Karen Amroth Rangers up against a horde of Gobbos. Keldon Rubachol trying to march through the crossbow bolts and arrows coming their way. And it's quite telling as well that here in the late game, in spite of Dale having all of those archers, the Misty Mountains is the faction that still has a little bit of ammo left, which again is a sign that they were a little bit too flippant with how many archers they had. Which when you bring that many archers, maybe you feel as though you can be, but not the case. Trying to sneak towards the crossbows and such, I think, were the Blackshot Dragon Slayers. They're not going to be allowed to, though. The Goblin King's bodyguard will intercept them. There isn't enough of these Blackshots anymore to resist the Goblin King's bodyguard. If both units were fully healthy, the Blackshots would win that fight, but not on this occasion. And again, it's going to come down to numbers. They will... There goes King Brand. They'll put up a valiant fight. And Dale are gone, which means Karen Amroth Rangers are the last surviving defending unit. They'll kill off a few more heavy goblins, but ultimately victory will be the attackers. And like I said, composition, part of a reason for that. Even on a siege, it's possible to bring, I think, too many archers, and I think Dale kind of made that mistake here. If they were going to bring that many archers, then I think they should have been prepared to be a little bit more efficient with them. They were a little bit too wasteful with some of their ammunition. And that did cost them ultimately in the end, I believe. Interesting to not see the Kindred of Caliborn from Lothlorien, but they did invest in other areas, so I can't really begrudge them there. The attack was slow. It wasn't a bad attack, though. I just think that it was a risky one. Like, that could have backfired on them. Like, if the defenders had used their skirmishers more efficiently, like I said, I think that this would have ended in a defending victory if the attackers had approached things like this. But, in the end, the Misty Mountains, the only faction left standing, they will be, so Azog can claim this whole place for his very own. And there we go. Yeah, 3% the difference, not too surprising that. Dale getting more kills than Lothlorien, which is interesting. Normally, when you see this kind of battle, you see the elves achieve more kills, but I would also suggest that, you know, Dale with their sheer amount of archers, probably pipping them to the post there. Umbar, they took the lead, to be fair, which is probably why they got slightly fewer kills than their two allies, but kills in this sort of situation aren't that important, to be fair. You know, really, did you achieve what you wanted to with your units is the key. And I think, in the vast majority of cases, I'd kind of say no for all of the factions, to be honest with you. I think there was room for improvement with all of the armies here. I think the Misty Mountains were a little slow. I think Rhun sent in far too many individual units to be slaughtered. I think Umbar... You know, Umbar, they kind of the same sort of thing, again a little bit disjointed. For the defenders, Dale, a little bit too wasteful. Lothlorien, maybe in a few instances where their lines started to show signs of wear and tear, they were a little slow to react. And that could prove to be fairly key. But regardless, let's see what did the damage for Umbar. Corsair Blackguards getting over 100 kills. Naran Irish Sentinels on the front line breaking 200. The rest of their army, none of them breaking 100 kills, which is interesting for Umbar. Umbar, usually you see a lot of their units do quite well, but in this situation, because they were the first ones in, a lot of wear and tear was inflicted on them pretty quickly by the plentiful amounts of Dalian archers. But big thank you to Kamul, Lord of the Easterlings, for sending me this battle replay. And big thank you to all of the players as well for being a part of it. As for what's next, I mean, it's kind of an interesting time period, because while of course lockdown and such is still in effect, I still have to do some what they're calling alternative assessments, effectively the exam replacement, because obviously they can't hold regular exams, which over the course of the next week and a half is going to be quite apparent in the schedule. So there may be sort of a few times where I do like where a video sort of drops out, so to speak. So instead of doing one video every 2 days at the least, it might be one every 3, at least on a very temporary basis. Like, to be honest with you, it'll only probably affect like 2 videos at the most, but it is still something that may very well happen. So I'm just putting that out there, that if I don't post on a day you expect me to, that'll be why. You know, you can probably expect the video to come out the very next day, if that does prove to be the case. But I'm just putting that out there sort of before it does actually kick in. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.